In this class, we are going to study about the classification of fungi. So we have studied about many basic properties of the kingdom fungi, like their nutrition or their hyphal or mycelial body, or whether they are unicellular or multicellular, or whether they are heterothallic or homothallic. And apart from that, we have also studied about various types of reproduction in the kingdom fungi, that is the asexual reproduction, the vegetative reproduction, and also the sexual reproduction. So on the basis of all those properties, we divide fungi into certain categories, and here we are going to see why and how those categories are formed, and what are the basis of classification, or what are the categories into which the fungi has been classified. So now we are going to start the classification of fungi. So first of all, the fungi has been classified into these all categories like zygomycetes or oomycetes, which come under phycomycetes, and apart from that the deuteromycetes or ascomycetes or basidiomycetes. So this is the general classification of fungi, but the basis of this classification are these properties. So first, before studying this classification, we'll study what is the reason behind this classification and why we classify fungi into these categories, and what are the basis and what are the reasons behind that classification. So the first reason or the first basis of our classification is the biochemistry. So in biochemistry, we can say that different groups of fungi have different chemicals into them, into their mycelium or hypha. So that is what comes under the biochemistry. So here we classify fungi into certain categories on the basis of certain antibiotics which could be present in them, or also there could be certain toxins like aflatoxins and various other types of toxins present in fungi. So this biochemistry basis of classification tells us which type of chemicals occur in which group of fungi. So this is about the chemicals present in the fungi or mycelium. So we know that the mycelium is the main body of a fungi. So instead of writing the fungi, we can also say the mycelium. So the biochemistry basis of classification tells us about the various chemicals which are present in the mycelium. So this is the first criteria and the simplest criteria of classification. So we don't have to study about this in much detail at NEET level. Now the second basis of classification is very important. So this life cycle varies in different groups of fungi. So this life cycle has a lot of variation. So this life cycle includes various types of life cycle. For example, there are certain types of life cycle which include the diplontic, haplontic, and haplodiplontic. So these are the three types of life cycle which are normally found in fungi. So in diplontic life cycle, we find that the adult body of the fungi is diploid, that is 2n. It contains the 2n number of chromosomes. But in the case of haplontic life cycle, the adult body contains n number of chromosomes, or we can say that the adult body or the mycelium or the fungi or the cells of the hypha are haploid, that is they have half the number of chromosomes. So this is the difference between haplontic and diplontic life cycle. Now there is something called as haplodiplontic life cycle. So in this haplodiplontic life cycle, the phase in which the cells are haploid is a certain time, but the more number of time or the majority of the time, during that time the cells are diplontic or they are diploid. That is, in the majority of the cases or for the maximum time of the life cycle of these type of fungi, the cells are diploid, but still there is a certain phase in their life cycle during which they are haploid. That is why it is called as haplodiplontic. So here the diploid is the dominant phase, haploid is not the dominant phase. So that is why it is called as haplodiplontic. So when we'll study about plants and other such categories, we'll study about other category which is called as diplohaplontic. So in that case, diplohaplontic will be just opposite of this. There the diploid phase will not be the dominant phase. The haploid will be the dominant phase. So here this diplontic phase is the dominant phase, but still there is a certain phase of life during which the cells will be haploid. So this is another basis of classification of the fungi into the above categories. Now the third is the type of spores. So initially we in this chapter we have studied about various types of spores. For example, the zoospores or just sporangiospores or the chlamydia or the arthrospores, which are also called as oidea, and also the conidia. So these were the various types of spores which were involved in asexual reproduction. So all those spores which were involved in asexual reproduction, that will come under the mitospores. So that category belongs to this mitospores. But also we have studied about ascospores or the basidiospores. So these are formed due to meiosis, and that will come under the meiospores. So the asexual spores are included in this category, that is the mitospores, and the ascospores or the basidiospores, which are formed in ascomycetes and basidiomycetes respectively, those will come under meiosis or meiospores. So in the case of meiospores, the spores are result of meiosis, that is reductional division. But here the spores will be formed by mitosis, that is equational division. So this is the difference between the types of spore present in the mitospores, that is the conidia or the zoospores or the sporangiospores or the various other categories like the oidea or the other such spores. Now the above spores includes the zygospores, or there might be some other spores like the ascospores and basidiospores. So we have these two types of spores, and we will later see that in the above such categories various types of such spores will be present. Now the fourth and most important basis of classification is this one. This is the most important classification, and this is what we have to study in complete detail. So it includes the structure of vegetative and also the structure of reproductive structure. So this vegetative structure will tell us how the body of the fungi, that is what is the property of the mycelium of the fungi. So we have seen the body of a fungi could be unicellular or multicellular. So the multicellular fungi are normally mycelial fungi. So the normal multicellular fungi are mycelial fungi. This is what is a simple vegetative property. Apart from that, there are various other type of properties. For example, we can have aseptate and septate. So this aseptate and septate is one of the most important criteria of classification. You can see here the first category that we classified was on the basis of this category only. So we know what is aseptate and septate from our previous classes. In our previous classes, we have studied when there are cross walls between two cells, that is when two cells are separated by distinct walls, that is called as septate. and where distinct walls are not present, there the hypha is cenocytic. So this aseptate is also called as cenocytic. So here the walls are not present, or they are not very distinct between two cells. Therefore the cytoplasms of different cells are together, or their nucleus could be multinucleate, or their cells could be multinucleate, or we can say that there is continuous protoplasm. So that is the first criteria that we have used here. You can see here the first one is phycomycetes and the other is eumycota. So here we have mycelium as aseptate, that is the cross walls will not be present in between the cells, but here the mycelium is septate, therefore between two cells there will be a distinct wall which will separate the cells. So this is the first basis of classification that we have used in the above form. So apart from that, various other properties are also involved in the classification. So these were the most important criteria of classification in terms of vegetative properties. Apart from that, we also have the reproductive structure or reproductive properties. So first basis of classification is So the first thing in terms of reproduction is presence or absence of sex organ or sexual reproduction. So here we can see here that sexual reproduction is known in these categories, and sexual reproduction is not found or not known in the category called deuteromycetes. So we can see here how important this sexual reproduction is. So in the above eumycota category, the next basis of classification is this one, that is the sexual reproduction. So here in the case of ascomycetes and basidiomycetes, we observe sexual reproduction, but in the case of deuteromycetes, we do not have such an example where sexual reproduction is observed. So that is why these are called as fungi imperfecti, because no sexual reproduction is involved in the case of deuteromycetes. But in this case, that is the phycomycetes, zygomycetes or the oomycetes, here sexual reproduction is known. So it is not that these two are in this category, therefore there is no sexual reproduction. These two also show sexual reproduction. It's not that these don't show. Apart from that, only this deuteromycetes is the category of the fungi which does not show sexual reproduction. So although it is in this category, because of the mycelium which is aseptate, these do show sexual reproduction. So these do show, both of these show sexual reproduction. So only one category of fungi is remaining which does not show sexual reproduction, and that is the deuteromycetes. Apart from that, we can see a presence or absence of sex organs. So there are certain categories of fungi where sex organs are absent and in some sex organs are present. So present or absence of sex organ does not mean that it will not be involved in sexual reproduction. So if a category of fungi does not have sexual reproduction, then also it can perform sexual reproduction. So this is a very important property. Apart from that, we know there are various types of gametic fusion. So this was one type, this was the second basis, we now have a third basis. So gametic fusion is also known as fertilization. So we have seen various types of syngamy, for example the isogamy or the anisogamy or the oogamy. So these are all some of the basis of classification. So in isogamy, both the types of fusing gamete, that is the first and the second gamete, will be similar in appearance. but they might be different in function. Here the gametes will either be, one will be motile, the other will be non-motile, or there could be one will be smaller and the other will be larger gamete. In the case of oogamous reproduction, one gamete will be smaller and motile, the other gamete will be larger and immotile, that is, it won't be able to locomote or move. So these are some of the types of gametic fusion, or we can also say that as syngamy. So instead of gametic fusion, we could also have written as syngamy. So the presence or absence of sex organ is one such feature. Now the other is sexual reproduction. Now we have the types of gametes formed during sexual reproduction. So apart from that, various other criteria of sexual reproduction is also there, and here various other properties of the vegetative structure, that is the mycelium of the fungi, is also there. Now we have one more category over here, and that is so in vegetative structure we also have one more property, and that is cells could be uninucleate, that is these could have one nucleus, these could have two nucleus, or these could also have multinucleate, that is more than two nucleus. So this is also a vegetative property on the basis of which classification is done. Now the last is the physiology. So it is pretty simple. Different fungi have different properties or processes occurring inside them. Some might show fermentation, some might be anaerobic, some might be aerobic, and the same nutrition process could vary greatly in different fungi. Apart from that, the excretion process or the process through which these metabolize certain chemicals, so it basically involves the various processes by which fungi survive. So those processes are very different in different categories of fungi. That is also a basis of classification. But according to our syllabus, the most important property or the most important basis of classification is this one, that is the fourth one, that is the structure of vegetative and reproductive organs, or vegetative or reproductive structure. Apart from that, the life cycle is also a very important property and the type of spore. So the second, third and fourth, these three are the most important criteria of classification of fungi. So now we know what is the criteria of classification, and now we can see the categories. So the first category, that is the Phycomycetes and Euchomycota, is on the basis of septate or aseptate mycelium. So in that case we have septate mycelium, and in this case we don't have a septate mycelium. The mycelium is cenocytic, or we can say that as aseptate. Now it is divided into two categories on the basis of sexual reproduction. Here we have oogamous. So we know what is oogamy because we have seen here. So in oogamous, one gamete will be large and non-motile, and the other gamete will be small and motile. Now in this case there is conjugation. So conjugation involves temporary fusion of two parents where the male pronuclei is transferred from one category to one organism to the other organism, and then they separate to produce daughter individuals. So we have studied conjugation in kingdom Monera, and we also have studied conjugation in kingdom Protista, especially in the case of Paramecium. So this is what is conjugation. So on the basis of the type of sexual reproduction, here we have conjugation and here we have oogamous. So oogamous is a category under syngamy. So here we have syngamy and here we have conjugation. So this is the two bases of classification of this category. Now we come to this category, that is the Eumycota. So in this case we have sexual reproduction known and unknown. So there we have the Deuteromycetes, in which sexual reproduction is not observed or not known. And in the case of this sexual reproduction known, we have this Ascomycetes and we have this Basidiomycetes. Now these two differ in their reproductive structure. Here we will observe formation of ascocarps. Here we will observe formation of basidium. and also basidiocarps. So these two differ on the basis of reproductive structures and also on the basis of their nutrition. So that nutrition will come under this physiology category. So these are the normal categories of fungi that we have to study according to our syllabus, and these are the basis or the reasons why those are classified into those categories. So now we are going to start the first category of the kingdom fungi, and that is the Phycomycetes from the next class.